When I proposed divorce, Donald was about to accompany his mistress to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. Seeing that I was serious, he remained silent for a few seconds and then said, "I understand. I crossed the line. Don't worry. I'll agree to any request you make." Others all said that I was lucky. I had been Miss Gloria for 10 years. Even after the divorce, Donald didn't treat me unfairly. Only I knew that I came to Hong Kong City for him the year I graduated, at the cost of almost breaking off relations with my parents. And only I remembered that he had his 3 ribs broken in order to marry me. Of course, all these things no longer mattered. I looked at Donald and smiled, saying, "Well, then I ask you not to appear in front of me again." Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. The rain was especially heavy tonight. The whole world seemed to be enveloped in an endless curtain of rain. The orange typhoon warning light was flashing at Victoria Harbour, lighting up every 15 seconds to remind everyone to make preparations for disaster prevention. At this moment, the nanny, carrying the packed luggage, said in a low voice, "Madam, the wind outside has subsided a bit. Let's go to the villa. The driver is already waiting in the parking lot." I gave a hum and turned to look at the wall clock. It was almost 10:30. Donald still hadn't come back. He had said that I should wait for him when he left during the day. Now it seemed that I probably wouldn't be able to wait for him. An hour later, the black Lincoln stopped at the villa at the foot of the mountain. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw Donald supporting a girl and walking out. Her belly was slightly rounded. She was wearing flat shoes and a loose-fitting dress, and her eyes were red as if she had been crying. I stood in the rain and looked up, meeting Donald's eyes. The nanny was somehow tripped up and didn't have time to get out of the car to hold an umbrella. Big raindrops poured down. In just a few seconds, most of my hair was already wet. Donald frowned slightly and instinctively let go of the girl, reaching out his hand to cover the top of my head. His broad palm still had some residual warmth, but it was soon soaked through by the rain. "A typhoon is coming soon. Where are you going?" I gently waved away his hand, took a few quick steps to the veranda, and frowned as I asked. Donald didn't answer. Instead, he said to the person waiting beside him, "Send Monica to the hospital first." I understood. No wonder he had dragged it out so late today and was going out at this hour. Presumably, she had pestered him all day with the excuse of not feeling well, and now she was insisting on going to the hospital for an examination. Hearing this, the girl tightly clutched Donald's sleeve as if she were about to cry, and said in fluent Cantonese urgently, "Ah Chen, I don't want to go alone. Accompany me, please." Donald coaxed her. "Don't be afraid. You go first." I was a bit dazed. Even though I had lived in Hong Kong City for 10 years, my Cantonese wasn't very good. Donald rarely spoke Cantonese to me on weekdays. He always said, "Gloria, you came to Hong Kong City alone for me. This isn't your hometown. There are no people or things you're familiar with. You don't have to learn this for me. I owe you." At this moment, I suddenly realized that what he said I didn't have to learn wasn't only his past, but also his daily life. I exhaled a mouthful of foul air and said to Donald, "I'll go in first. Hurry up. I have something to talk to you about." After saying that, I walked straight in. I knew he would stay. As for how long he would stay, I didn't care. A few minutes later, Donald sat on the sofa. He seemed to be thinking about how to explain to me. In fact, it wasn't necessary. I had known this girl for a long time. She was the youngest daughter of Donald's father's close friend, Monica. She had just returned from Germany a year ago and had fallen for Donald at the first sight of him. The girl in her early 20s, when in love, sacrificed herself like a moth to a flame. In just half a year, she spent 1/3 of her family property as fuel for Donald's career. At that time, I even teased him about an old cow eating young grass and tricking the girl's assets with his looks. Now, looking at it, perhaps this was the curse of love. When someone devoted their feelings wholeheartedly, someone else would be touched. No one could resist it. Just like me, who met Donald in a foreign country at the age of 17 and fell in love with him when he reached out to protect me. That's why I abandoned everything and came to Hong Kong City with him at the age of 22. Seeing him frown, I soothed him. "You don't have to explain to me." Hearing this, he seemed a bit surprised, and guilt appeared on his face. "Gloria, tomorrow I'll arrange for the lawyer to transfer 33.3% of the shares of the subsidiary company to your name." "It's not 33.3%. Donald, you committed adultery during the marriage. I want all the shares of the subsidiary company. I took out the prepared divorce agreement from my bag and gently pushed it in front of him. Looking at him, I said calmly, Donald, let's get a divorce. The brief silence was like the calm before the typhoon. Everyone knew it was false. Just waiting for the typhoon eye to accumulate and absorb enough strength. It would rush straight towards the vulnerable port city. Then, the earth would shake and the mountains would crumble. And everything would be destroyed. I saw intense emotions flash in Donald's eyes. But he was no longer the young lad who was willing to have his 3 ribs broken in order to marry me. So, in just a moment, the emotions disappeared completely. Gloria, you've thought it through. It wasn't a question, but an affirmation. I nodded. Of course, otherwise, I wouldn't have come here. He paused for a moment, as if he understood. The villa at the foot of the mountain was only a distance of 1 mountain top away from the ancestral house. At that time, Donald's father was very angry about his insistence on marrying me and said that as long as he was alive, he would never recognize me as his daughter-in-law. So, in the past 10 years, I could count on one hand the number of times I had come to the villa. I didn't know if he was being clever and specifically let Monica live here, or if his father thought Monica was the daughter-in-law of his family and was qualified to live at the foot of the ancestral house. In any case, I knew he was here. I came here just for the divorce. I understand. I crossed the line. Don't worry, I'll agree to any request you make. As he said this, he reached out and touched his pocket. Clearly, he had touched it, but he didn't take out the Mont Blanc pen that he always carried with him, which I had given him. I didn't expose it and just handed him another one at the right moment. I casually tapped under the agreement and said, I've already signed it. You sign it too. You know me. I don't want what I shouldn't have. I was subtly urging him. He gave a hum, opened the pen cap, paused for a long time, and finally signed his name next to mine. After he signed, I reached out and took it and put it in the folder. A piece of paper so thin that the light could shine through it had actually carried my 10 years. After getting the divorce agreement, I stood up and walked towards the 2nd floor. When I reached the corner, I leaned over and asked him, Is the master bedroom occupied? He shook his head. No. I curved my lips and watched the dim yellow light fall on him. I remembered the first time I came to the villa. At that time, he was afraid that I wouldn't get used to the dampness at the foot of the mountain. So he brought several sets of silk beddings for changing. He refused to let others do it and carefully spread out the mattress and quilt cover layer by layer in the master bedroom. All of it was his sincere heart. It was a pity that we only stayed for 1 night, because the next day he took me to the ancestral house. When Donald's father saw me, he was so angry that he almost fainted. He pointed at Donald's nose and cursed. Who couldn't you marry? You had to marry her. I think you're deliberately stabbing me in the back. Seeing that Donald refused to back down, his father reached out and grabbed the expensive ivory snuff bottle on the mahogany table and smashed it hard on Donald's head. Then he picked up the thick solid golden Nanmo walking stick and directly hit Donald on the back. The dull sound lasted for a long time until his father was tired, gasping for breath, and angrily shouted at us, Get out! Get out! Only then did Donald grit his teeth and stand up, his face deathly pale and almost unable to stand. He took my hand and slowly walked out. When we went to the hospital, we found out that he had his 3 ribs broken, even though he was in so much pain that he almost fainted. In front of his father, he never let go of my hand. Until the end, he was still saying word by word, I don't care whose daughter Gloria is. In this life, I will only marry her. But in just 10 years, his father was still alive, and our relationship ended. It was actually a good thing. It was better than us not being able to continue even after his father died. That night, Donald only stayed for half an hour and then left. I guessed that Monica had probably urged him as soon as she arrived at the hospital. In fact, I really didn't like the villa at the foot of the mountain. But that night, I slept surprisingly soundly. Coincidentally, even the typhoon changed its course. At the last moment, it turned and went elsewhere, leaving Victoria Harbor calm and peaceful. However, I still didn't know if he remembered that day was our 10th wedding anniversary. Half a month later, I asked Donald to meet me at the No. 12 government building in Wan Chai Harbor and formally filed for divorce. In the court, the lawyer said in a low voice, Madam, he also gave you 3 luxury mansions. I looked at Donald. He was standing opposite me and nodded at me, as if saying, Take them. I owe you. I suppressed my emotions and said to the lawyer, I don't want the properties and cars. Change them into shares. Let's get this over with quickly. He nodded and went to discuss with Donald's lawyer again. Taking this opportunity, Donald walked up to me and seemed to promise, "Don't worry, you'll receive the annual dividends." I smiled. I know. I want the shares just because I thought of a very interesting way to play during this 1 year. When he saw me smile, he actually seemed to relax a bit and said the same words as that night. "Okay, whatever you want. I'll agree to any request you make." I didn't say anything. I just felt a bit nauseous. Thanks to Donald's generosity, the property division was very quick, and I was also very satisfied with the final result. I got all the shares of Donald's company's wholly owned subsidiary, with a market value of over $2 billion. I also got 45% of the shares of the 3 technology companies invested by Donald's company, with a market value of about $700 million. Adding the several new companies that Donald had personally selected in recent years. All in all, I took away property worth more than $3 billion from him. It wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a little either. When all the matters were settled, I finally got that certificate. I felt completely relaxed. I walked quickly along the corridor and headed outside. "Gloria, Gloria." Donald chased after me a few steps, his voice getting louder and louder. I stopped impatiently and suddenly turned around to look at him. I frowned and said, "Donald, stop calling me. It's disgusting." He was stunned for a second and finally realized that my good attitude in the past half-month was waiting for the day of the real divorce. He was silent for a long time and finally said, "I just wanted to say that you can rest assured. I'll agree to any other requests you have in the future." I smiled. A beam of light fell down along the Roman column behind Donald, pointing straight at him. It was as if fate was playing a trick on me, asking me, "Gloria, don't you really want to consider it again?" There's still a ray of light in him. I didn't hesitate and nodded, saying, "Okay, Donald. Then my request is that you are never allowed to appear in front of me again in the future." For a moment, I saw some cracks appear on his face. He looked as if he had been punched in the face, and his face was deathly pale, and I turned around easily and raised my foot to walk outside. At this moment, the sun was at its highest point, making Queens Road shine with golden light. Compared with that beam of light, there was a vast expanse of sunshine here. The news of my divorce from Donald spread quickly. I didn't have to think to know who had done it. Monica had been pestering him for a year. Finally, she managed to get pregnant, and then I took the initiative to divorce. If she didn't spread this news to the moon, it would mean she was useless. However, I didn't expect that she was even more stupid than I thought. As soon as I came out, there was a circle of media surrounding the door. They were pointing their cameras and microphones at me, chattering like sparrows in a frying pan. "Ms. Gloria, is it true that you divorced Donald? Is it because you didn't have a child in these 10 years? Ms. Gloria, according to the rumors, because you couldn't have a child. Donald's father has never recognized your identity. Right. Will your divorce affect the future development of Donald's company? Were you kicked out? Ms. Gloria, tell us about it. Ms. Gloria, Ms. Gloria." I was too lazy to respond. Just as I was about to ask the bodyguards to stop these people, I saw Monica walking towards me with her belly. Her voice had a unique tone, and she quickly attracted the attention of the reporters. "Oh, you guys are so mean. She's already in so much pain because she can't have a child. Now she's divorced and is like a homeless dog, and you're still asking all these questions." Those reporters, being so shrewd, immediately turned their attention and said, "Monica, is the baby in your belly Donald's little grandson of the company? Monica, did Donald divorce Miss Gloria for you and the baby in your belly? Monica, when will you and Donald have your wedding?" Monica smiled brightly and waved her hand, saying, "Soon, soon. Whether it's a boy or a girl, it's Ah Chen's first child." Seeing that my expression didn't change, Monica raised her eyebrows, walked closer to me, and said in a low voice, "Stop pretending. If you want to cry, just cry. You can't blame others. Who asked you to be unable to have a child and unable to keep your man?" I didn't say anything. I looked at her and raised my hand to slap her. After a crisp slap, Monica's left face turned red. She looked at me furiously and said, "How dare you hit me?" I smiled and said, "Why don't I dare? The baby in your belly is 3 months old, and I just divorced Donald a few days ago. This is ironclad evidence of his infidelity during the marriage. If you say one more word, I'll make sure your child is born with the label of an illegitimate child." I slowly spoke in her tone. After I finished speaking, She gritted her teeth and glared at me, with deep hatred in her eyes. I didn't understand. I had already divorced Donald, and she would soon get what she wanted. Why did she hate me? Soon, Donald's car stopped by the roadside. He pushed open the car door and walked straight over. The reporters tried to swarm around him again, but were dispersed to the side by the bodyguards. He looked at me, and his eyes darkened. He had lost a lot of weight in just a few days. His custom-made suit actually looked a bit empty on him. When Monica saw him, she immediately looked aggrieved and rushed over to grab his arm. But he pushed her away directly. He walked over quickly and asked me, "Are you okay?" I raised my eyebrows. What was going on? But I still said politely, "I'm fine. I'm leaving now." After saying that, I prepared to walk in the other direction. Monica got angry immediately and said, "Donald, I'm still pregnant with your child. You're asking her if she's okay." She leaned in with the face that I had slapped and said pitifully, "Look, she even hit me. How dare she hit me?" Donald frowned and said, looking down, "Gloria has always had a gentle personality. What did you say or do to provoke her? Can't you be more sensible?" Monica was scolded by him and stood there stunned, and he raised his foot and chased after me. I didn't give a definite answer and asked, "Is there anything else?" He paused and said, "Are you leaving Hong Kong City?" This morning, I brought a group of accountants from Jingzhou to take care of several companies. He should have guessed that I was going to leave. I gave a hum. He asked again, "When will you come back?" Before I could speak, Monica let out a scream. Apparently, she was so angry with Donald's words that she was stunned and only reacted now. I smiled, and my eyes flashed as I said, "On the day Monica gives birth, I'll come to give a gift. Donald, at that time, how about I give you a big gift?" He lowered his head and remained silent, his emotions not right. Over these years, I had hardly seen him look so gloomy. This reminded me of our first meeting. At that time, I had just arrived in Los Angeles and wasn't familiar with the place at all. I was often laughed at as a bumpkin. They stuck chewing gum in my hair and smeared thick glue on my chair. It was a kind of bullying that was neither too big nor too small. And the teacher didn't care. Until one day, several boys laughed and said they would take me to a fun place. They dragged me along, and at the last second, Donald stood in front of me. He looked up at those people and said coldly, "Fuck off." In the end, there was naturally a fight. He got injured, and his eyes were still gloomy. Looking at me, he said, "From now on, you follow me." I carefully applied medicine to him and nodded when I heard that. In just an instant, I was struck. After that day, I became his follower. I also learned that he had been left alone abroad at the age of 15. The 2 years abroad had given him a severe case of depression. At this moment, I felt a bit familiar. It seemed that he was having another episode, but I didn't want to care anymore. After all, we were already divorced. I just pretended not to notice. A few seconds later, he looked at me and said, "Okay, then you must come." A few days later, I returned to Jingzhou. The moment I landed at the airport, I actually felt a bit nervous about going back to my hometown. I remembered that at the age of 22, I graduated from UCLA and followed Donald to Hong Kong City. My parents didn't have much of a reaction at first, just complaining that a grown daughter would leave home. But not long after, when my parents learned about Donald's identity, they almost desperately ordered me to return to Jingzhou immediately. At that time, my father was as angry as Donald's father and was almost driven to death by anger. He just told me to come back and not regret it after really killing him with anger. I refused and didn't understand why they didn't allow us to be together. Until Donald had his 3 ribs broken, was hospitalized for more than half a year, and still insisted on marrying me. My mother was then moved. She half forced and half persuaded my father to fly to Hong Kong City and told me an old story. It turned out that both my father and Donald's father had once been stowaways who made it to Hong Kong City. The two of them had encountered several arrests and detentions together. In the most dangerous situation, Donald's father almost died in prison. It was my father who gave up his water and food to save his life. But his kindness wasn't repaid. During a major search, Donald's father reported my father. Because of this report, my father lost the possibility of staying in Hong Kong City. However, Donald's father stayed and even became wealthy. After that, my father was unwilling to give up and turned back to the capital. After struggling through hardships, he finally achieved what he had today. After learning about Donald's identity, my father refused to relent. After all, with Donald's father being like that, how could Donald be a good person? Later, my parents wanted to take me away, but I didn't want to leave. In the end, it almost led to a complete break with my parents. 10 years had passed, and looking at the present, whether it was Donald's betrayal of infidelity during the marriage, or the final result of our divorce and going our separate ways, it could only be said that what goes around comes around, and I could be considered to have brought trouble on myself. Gloria, Gloria. A voice that was both strange and slightly familiar sounded. I looked up and was a bit surprised. I didn't expect that he would come to pick me up. The man walking towards me was tall and thin. His well-fitted dark woolen coat reached his knees, and the black turtleneck underneath made him look particularly abstinent. His same-colored brushed suit pants were straight and wrinkle-free, and he was wearing a pair of derby shoes, exuding an air of scholarly refinement. I waved and smiled, greeting him. Julius, long time no see. Julius was the son of my mother's friend. He was the same age as me. He had been a top student since birth and had never gotten second place. He came from a family of scholars for 3 generations, with a good background. It was said that he was currently teaching at Peking University, mainly teaching psychology. He was happy to see me. He reached out to take my suitcase and then handed me the hand warmer that was already warm in his pocket, saying, "It's very cold, right? It's only the beginning of December, and it has already snowed once in Jingzhou." Compared to Hong Kong City, Jingzhou was indeed much colder. I nodded. Where are my parents? In the past 2 years, as my parents and I got older, our relationship had improved a lot compared to earlier years. However, after all, I had broken my parents' hearts in the past. If they didn't come to pick me up, I understood. They're all outside. It's too cold, so I didn't let them get out of the car. You'll be able to see them soon. Julius's voice was very pleasant. His standard Beijing accent had a bit of the straightforwardness of Northerners. I missed this accent more than the Cantonese that often had twists and turns. A few minutes later, I got into the car. I saw my parents sitting side by side in the back seat. My heart skipped a few beats. In just a second, my nose felt sour, and I wanted to cry. Before I could speak, my mother leaned over first. After staring at me for a few moments, her eyes turned red. "Gloria, you've lost weight. During this period, haven't you been eating properly?" After not seeing each other for a long time, the first thing she said was that I had lost weight. I pursed my lips and called out, "Mom." All the grievances and the disappointment that had been accumulated for I didn't know how long poured out the moment I saw my mother. 5 years of passionate love and 10 years of marriage had wasted half of my life. How could I not hate? But in Hong Kong City, I didn't have a haven. I could only hold up a small piece of sky for myself. Fortunately, this was Jingzhou, and I still had my parents. My mother responded and wiped away a tear. My mother and I looked at each other with tearful eyes in someone else's car. "Okay, what are you crying for? It's not a big deal. You'll make Xiao Gao laugh." A few seconds later, my father coughed softly. Although his voice was a bit unnatural, it was still full of energy. Julius raised his eyebrows and smiled, saying, "Uncle you, I didn't bring my ears out today. I can't hear anything." With this sentence, the sad atmosphere just now was somewhat dispelled. I looked at my father, opened my mouth. "Dad." My father gave a hum and looked at me deeply. "It's good that you're back. Just come back." In the evening, my parents and I returned to Wangjing. Julius had classes tomorrow, so he drove back. This house was the one I lived in before going abroad. Now my parents had already bought a bigger and more luxurious house in a better location. However, since I was back, I still wanted to live here. After taking a shower, I snuggled up next to my mother and said, "Mom, can I sleep with you tonight?" My father snorted. "As soon as you come back, you take over your mother." "It's really," I smiled and joked, rebelling against the heavens. My father was taken aback by my words but also laughed. My mother couldn't bear to refuse me and nodded, saying, "Okay, we mother and daughter can talk. Let your father sleep in the second bedroom." I smiled softly, feeling truly happy. After my mother and I turned off the lights and lay down, she still couldn't help it and asked me in a low voice, "You and just got divorced?" As if she was afraid that mentioning the name would make me sad. My mother spoke vaguely. I gave a hum. "Divorced. And I got a lot of money from him." My mother pinched me. "You child. Husband and wife are originally one. What's his is yours. Moreover, he's really out of line. He should have been made to leave the marriage with nothing. Those from his family are completely rotten to the core." listening to my mother's almost indignant scolding. I smiled and said, "Yeah, Mom. You and Dad are really good at judging people. I was just blind. I regret wasting so much time. If only I had. If I had left with my parents, would the result have been different?" As soon as the words fell, my mother fell silent. It took a long time for her to say, "Everyone has been blinded by love at some point. It's not a waste. There are no wasted steps in life. Every step counts. It's precisely because of these more than 10 years that you are who you are now." I shed a tear in the dark. My mother didn't blame me, but I felt that I was really stupid. I was so certain that Donald would always only love me. A few seconds later, my mother got up and clicked her tongue, saying, "I think Julius is a good one, although he got married and divorced. That child." I was amused. The topic had changed too quickly. "Mom, I know Julius is a good person, but you can't just force it. He doesn't like me." "Who said that? He has liked you for many years. If you hadn't chased after him to Hong Kong City and gotten married, he wouldn't have been so miserable as to listen to his mother and get married too. He divorced in half a year and hasn't remarried yet." I paused. In my mind, I recalled that during the years I had known Julius, he did like to follow me around. At the age of 15, I rode a motorcycle out of the alley and couldn't brake in time, crashing into a bridge pier head-on. My knee hit the ground, bleeding. Without thinking, Julius threw away his bike and rushed over to pick me up. The man who was usually as calm as a log was now running around like a headless chicken. He mumbled, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Let's go to the hospital." "Where's the hospital?" "The hospital." I wanted to laugh a bit. When I came to my senses, I saw my mother staring at me. I turned around and said, "There's nothing like that. Don't worry about it. I'm not planning to get married again. Let's go to sleep." My mother gave in. "Oh." And before going to sleep, she still told me to think about it again. It had been a week of rainy weather. Even though the typhoon didn't pass through, it still had an impact. In a private hospital in the center of Hong Kong City, Monica's voice was sharp and piercing. "I don't care. Find him immediately. I want to see Donald. He can't treat me like this." Donald rubbed his forehead. He just felt that since Gloria left, he had been getting more and more tired. "Don't make a noise. I'm here." He spoke at the door of the ward. As soon as Monica saw him, tears streamed down her face. She held her belly and got out of bed, not even bothering to put on her shoes. "Ah Chen, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have made everyone know that you and Gloria got divorced. I didn't know it would affect Donald's company." That day, Monica made a scene at the entrance of Donald's company. It spread quickly, and soon the stock of Donald's company's headquarters kept falling. Donald knew in his heart that this matter wasn't entirely due to the media's hype. It was Gloria who took action. After she returned to Jingzhou, she sold all her shares to Guangting. Guangting was her father's enterprise, and its influence was even more astonishing than he had imagined. In just a week, Gloria used Guangting to force Donald's company into a corner. If he didn't want Donald's company's subsidiary and several other companies to completely become Guangting's branch in Hong Kong City, he could only buy back the shares at a high price. If he didn't buy them back, with Guangting's ability, it would soon acquire all the companies, and then it would be Donald's company's turn. If Donald's company changed its ownership to our family, his father would probably die of anger immediately. Donald took a deep breath of the cold air. So the interesting way she mentioned was to make him, and Donald's company, sacrifice themselves like Monica had done in the past year, burning their assets as fuel for Guangting. What a steady, accurate, and ruthless move. Then, he shook his head, thinking that it was indeed like her. He still remembered that she was only 17 years old that year. After getting familiar with the environment following him, she started to dominate the situation. In a competition, she single-handedly withstood the pressure from 14 teams and several mentors who looked down on the Chinese, using the last $500 they had as startup capital. In just half a month, she successively took over the entire assets of 4 teams. Then, together with him, they repelled the remaining 10 teams. Starting from $500, it grew to $5,000, and then to a full $79,624. In just 3 months, they won, and they won completely. Later, she donated all the assets she had earned back to the country. Just thinking of this, he couldn't help but want to laugh. In those years, in that foreign land where there were only the two of them, his Gloria was by his side no matter when. She was like a little sun, melting away all the malice. When she heard his argument with his father, She would hug him to comfort him, after learning that he had been alone abroad, once being ostracized, despised, bullied, and isolated. When he had suffered from unwarranted insults and scolding, she would shed tears of heartache. And those past experiences that almost drove him to the brink of collapse were all resolved one by one after she came. Even when he hurt himself during a bout of depression, she would rush up, hug him, and keep saying, "I will always be with you." It was Gloria who brought him back to life. Ah Chen, ah Chen. The violent shaking brought him back to his senses. Monica pouted unhappily and said, "What were you thinking about? Did you hear what I said?" My dad asked when we're going to get married. Donald pushed Monica's hand away. Get married. He would only have one wife in his life. A few seconds later, it was as if he had figured something out. Everything he had originally belonged to Gloria. If she wanted it, he would be more than willing to kneel down and offer it to her. Since she wanted to play now, then what was wrong with playing the beacon fires to amuse the lords trick for her? All right, I still have things to do. Stop making a fuss. After saying that, Donald turned around and left, leaving Monica shouting hoarsely behind. In the speeding car, Donald frowned tightly. Looking at the video, Gloria's parents were looking at her with smiles in their eyes, and beside her sat a tall and straight man. He had seen this man in Gloria's photo album from her childhood. He remembered that his name was Julius. It seemed that in just half a month, Gloria's parents seemed to have already planned to find her a new marriage partner. And this man obviously liked Gloria very much. A few seconds later, Donald closed his eyes and thought. He had been wrong. He had thought that even after the divorce, he still had the ability to keep her by his side. Although he signed the divorce agreement, he just wanted to ease the hatred in her heart. After all, they had been together for more than 10 years. She was so soft-hearted that she would always forgive him. But now, he suddenly felt a bit panicked. In fact, whether it was Guangting or Jingzhou, what he was most afraid of was still her parents. 10 years ago, Gloria was willing to abandon everything and go to Hong Kong City for him. But now that she had returned to Jingzhou, it was probably impossible to let her go south alone again. When he opened his eyes again, determination flashed in Donald's eyes. He took out his phone and made a call. Release the shares of Donald's company. Book me the earliest flight ticket to Jingzhou. The sooner, the better. Sister Wei, good morning. There's a good piece of news and an even better piece of news. Which one do you want to hear first? During this period, I had joined Guangting, and no one could say no to me. The person talking to me now was the secretary my father had found for me. She was 25 years old, with a bachelor's and master's degree from Peking University. She was recruited into Guangting right after graduation. It was a bit of a waste of her talent to have her be my secretary. I smiled and said, "Hear the good news first." Her eyes blinked. Mr. Julius sent flowers again this morning. He said he just happened to pass by. But I don't think so. The style of the flower bouquet is like the ones wrapped by that old store in the west of the city. TSK. It's dozens of kilometers back and forth. Only then did I see a bunch of flowers placed on the large office desk. They were pink with a hint of tender white. Not many, just 11, symbolizing faith and waiting. I raised my eyebrows and asked calmly, "Then what's the even better news?" The secretary became more serious and quickened her speech speed. This morning, news came from Hong Kong City that Donald's company has released shares. It's just the right amount for us to acquire all of them. Seeing that I didn't say anything, she restrained some of her smile. She asked carefully, "Do you want to acquire them?" After all, I had been married to Donald for 10 years, so it was normal for the secretary not to be sure of my thoughts. I looked up and raised my eyebrows. Why not? Who would turn down making money? The secretary nodded. I understand. I tilted my chin. Go ahead. After she turned around, I took out my phone and sent a message to Julius. Thank you for the flowers. Would you do me the honor of letting me treat you to dinner tonight? Almost immediately, there were 2 beeps, and the reply came from the other side. It's my pleasure. Julius arrived first in the evening. He reserved an inner private room and was pouring tea. Sorry, there was a bit of traffic on the way. I put down my bag and sat in the seat to his right. Although it was a private room for 2 people, it was spacious enough for 5 or 6 people to sit. I deliberately chose the seat next to him. Julius's hands paused slightly, and he looked up at me. I had specifically gone back to change my clothes and put on makeup. I had changed the lake blue silk shirt and black suit pants I wore during the day into a form-fitting round-neck dress with a side slit. knowing that he liked woody fragrances. I also specifically changed my perfume. Julius put down the shisha teapot in his hand and smiled, asking, "Are there other guests?" I raised my eyebrows. Can't a woman dress up for someone she likes? Even though I didn't have too many emotions towards him, I still had to admit, he was really smart. And it was simple and easy to get along with smart people, especially since he liked me. So he was even more considerate. Seeing that I didn't admit it, he didn't ask any further. He just told the waiter that they could serve the dishes. We chatted briefly. We talked from the north to the south, from domestic matters to foreign affairs. Suddenly, someone pushed the door open and entered. The voice carried a bit of weariness, as if coming from afar. "Sorry, all the private rooms are full. I wonder if it's convenient to share a table." I don't know where Donald learned to follow local customs. He even knew about sharing a table. I didn't even look up. "It's not convenient. Get out." He smiled and walked over to sit next to me. He glanced at the hem of my dress, and his face darkened a bit. "A guest is a guest. Gloria, I've been on a plane for several hours. I'm really tired," he said in a low voice, and his cheeky attitude was exactly the same as in the old days. "Sorry, I wonder if Mr. Julius minds." Donald seemed to have just seen Julius. He asked with a forced smile. Julius looked at me and smiled, saying, "I don't mind. However, we've already finished eating. If Mr. Lou is hungry, you can order a few more dishes at this table. These are just leftovers after all, and it's easy to have indigestion if you eat them." I raised my eyebrows. Julius was more aggressive than I had imagined. After saying that, he stood up and reached out his hand to me. I didn't hesitate to take his hand and stood up with his help. The two of us were snuggled up, and the distance between us had long exceeded the safe limit for friends. In an instant, Donald's face darkened, and he reached out to stop us, saying, "Gloria, come home with me." I couldn't help but laugh and asked back, "Home? Which home?" "This is my home. Do you want me to go back to Hong Kong City with you?" "That's your home, not mine." Hearing my words, his back straightened instantly. His face turned pale, and he even seemed to have trouble catching his breath. After a few seconds, he said, "I'm sorry for you. What do you want?" "Donald's company. As long as you come home with me, I'm willing." "Donald, I find that you have a short memory for important things." I interrupted him. "You seem to have forgotten that we're already divorced." "I won't go back, and I won't accept any of your attempts to please me." He pursed his lips. Seeing my determination, most of the color drained from his face. It was as if he had been severely injured. I frowned slightly, and suddenly remembered the robbery we encountered in Los Angeles. I still remembered that it happened in the second year I was in Los Angeles. Those people were very fierce, as if they had come prepared. They blocked several Asians and asked us to give them money, take off our clothes, and hand over all our valuable items. Donald protected me with his body and stared at them fiercely. He whispered in my ear, "Stay close to me." I nodded repeatedly, afraid that if I wasn't careful, both he and I would lose our lives there. A few minutes later, he found the right opportunity to fight with one of them. Who knew that the man had a firearm? The 2 gunshots scared me out of my wits, but his face remained unchanged, and he just said to me, "Stay close to me. Run, Gloria. Don't be afraid. Follow me." I ran as fast as I could and followed him out. When we reached a safe place, I realized that he had been shot in the arm and shoulder, and he didn't mention it at all, afraid that I would be scared. Fortunately, the gangsters used old guns that had been passed around many times, and the bullets didn't have hard shell casings. Otherwise, his left hand would probably have been crippled. I cried bitterly, afraid that he would die. Tears couldn't stop flowing down. At that time, his face was as pale as it was now, but he still didn't forget to comfort me. "Stop crying. You look so ugly, like a little tabby cat." Now, it was probably impossible to go back to that time. I didn't want to be controlled by past emotions anymore. I looked at him and said, "I remember that on the day we got divorced, you said that you would agree to any request I had in the future." Donald's face changed, and he tried to stop me, but it was too late. "I want you to never appear in front of me again in the future." I said this sentence twice, each time more seriously, each time more resolutely. After saying that, I leaned against Julius and said softly, "Donald, I'm going to give it a try with someone else. Don't come to find me again. I'm going to start a new life." In an instant, it was as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were crumbling, and everything was being destroyed. At this moment, Donald was like a vulnerable city ravaged by a typhoon. When he blinked, a tear actually fell. He opened his mouth, and I could only vaguely hear a few words. "Don't do this. Don't treat me like this, Gloria." He gave up everything and sacrificed Donald's company, just to beg for my forgiveness and take me home. But I was holding someone else's hand and telling him that I was going to start a new life. I didn't look at him anymore and turned around with Julius and left. I knew that he had always been gambling on my soft heart, both when we got divorced and when he had an episode of his illness. But what had I done wrong to be treated like this by him? I was unwilling, and I hated him. I hated that he had treated me so well in the past, and I hated that he had destroyed everything now. Donald fell ill. He was originally stubborn. His extreme mental illness was triggered by me and relapsed. He was in a daze all day long, and it had become so serious that he couldn't eat on his own. He could only rely on those cold medical devices to maintain his vital signs. Donald's company was also in chaos. Guanting took the opportunity to acquire a lot of shares and became the second largest shareholder, second only to Donald. I heard that after Donald's father learned about it, he couldn't hold on and was sent to the emergency room. Both father and son were seriously ill. If no one stepped in, Donald's company was likely to go bankrupt. In the end, it was Monica who begged in front of my father. She used her life and the baby in her belly to blackmail and force her family to invest money and effort. She was really a silly girl. But also, the love of parents for their children knows no bounds. In less than a month, she almost lost her life. But Donald's company was still on the verge of collapse. It was Guanting. It was me, who had secretly and openly acquired all the market shares and reaped huge profits. Making a mistake once could be said to be being blinded by love. Making the same mistake a second time was extremely foolish. Just as Donald's company was on the verge of collapsing completely and becoming the nourishment for Guanting, and Donald was on the verge of dying, Donald's father came to Jingzhou and begged in front of my parents. He had just come out of the hospital, with white hair, trembling, as if he didn't have much time left. At this moment, in front of my father, he bent over, looking more than 20 years older. A few seconds later, he actually knelt down and shouted hoarsely, "Yu Ting, if you want Donald's company, if you want my life, if you want me to kneel down and beg you, to apologize to you, I'm sorry. You can do whatever you want. I was wrong. I betrayed my trust, and I'm worse than a pig or a dog. But my son, he truly loves your daughter. I only beg you to let her go and see him." It was me. I said I had cancer and needed my grandson's bone marrow to prolong my life. I also drugged Ah Chen and that girl from the Su family so that they had a night together. It's all my fault. Ah Chen has never loved anyone else. He just wanted that child to save my life. His words were full of regret, and each word seemed to be stained with blood. His eyes were full of fear of losing his son. It was so different from the way he had left Donald alone abroad for those years and had broken his 3 ribs. Even though I knew that this might be a father's love, but I still felt it was extremely disgusting. Even though Donald's father knelt down and begged, my father didn't promise on my behalf. He wanted me to make the decision myself. He just had someone send Donald's father to the hospital where Donald was and ordered to find the best doctor. I knew that my father was afraid that if I wanted to turn back and be with Donald again, his father must not die because of me. Parents who love their children will plan for their future. But my mother couldn't bear it. She covered her chest and kept asking me, "Gloria, what do you think?" I exhaled a mouthful of foul air and said, "I'll go and see him." In the hospital, Donald was rarely awake. He had just seen his father, with white hair. There was no trace of the former hero left. It was all his fault. One false step had led to eternal regret, hurting himself and his father. At this moment, he still didn't know that his father's cancer was fake. He only knew that soon Gloria was going to come and see him. Half an hour later, I knocked on the door of the ward. Donald's eyes were filled with surprise, but when he saw Julius behind me, his expression darkened. However, he didn't dare to act high and mighty anymore. He half relied on his body and said, "Gloria, you came to see me." I nodded and said to him, "I'm here to tell you 2 things. If you can pull through, then live. If you can't, then it's okay to die." Donald's face was pale, but he still forced a smile and said, "I can pull through, as long as you're by my side." I didn't respond and was straightforward. "Your father doesn't have cancer. You don't have to worry about him dying of the disease. However, it's not certain either. Who knows? Anything could happen." He only froze for a second before reacting. His lips trembled slightly as he said, So, that night, I gave a hum. Your dad drugged you. He lowered his head, looking as if in pain and also as if helpless. I continued, fortunately, your dad doesn't have cancer. Even if he did, Monica's child couldn't save him. That child isn't yours. In our 10-year marriage, the one who couldn't have children wasn't me. His face turned even paler, and he quickly understood the purpose of my saying these two things. Looking at me, he said, Gloria, I'm not. I know. I interrupted him. Of course, you didn't cheat on me with Monica because I couldn't have children. You were just set up by your father and believed him. You wanted to keep the bone marrow to save him. But, Donald, I don't believe you're really that stupid. So stupid that you would believe your father when he said he had cancer. I looked up at him. You wanted to save your father, but you also wanted a child of your own, even if you don't admit it. I know you too well. You didn't check and confirm whether your father really had cancer because you wanted to take this opportunity to keep this child. You were letting things take their course. You were waiting for the child to be born and make me accept it. After all, in your heart, I couldn't have children. Right, Donald. You not only betrayed me and our marriage, but you also insulted my intelligence, despised my personality, and even let down my love for you. So, my divorce from you wasn't out of pique. I was serious. Do you understand? I didn't expect that as soon as I finished speaking. Donald fainted. Within half an hour, he was issued a critical condition notice twice. I stood outside the ICU with a frown, looking at Julius who had come with me. A flash of inspiration hit me, and I asked, You're an expert in psychology. What do you think? He nodded. It's true. Mental illnesses are the most difficult to treat. If the patient has no will to live, their organs will soon die. There have been many previous cases in clinical trials. What you just said was enough to make him lose all hope and want to die immediately. I came here just to help you see if it was real or not. I think he might be dying soon. I was silent for a few seconds and then asked, He shook his head. It doesn't count. It's not even manslaughter. I gave in. Oh, and didn't say anything more. I just thought that Julius was really good at understanding people's minds. Another hour passed. Donald was finally saved. The doctor said, Mr. Lou has a very low will to live. It's hard to say how much he will recover in the future. I have to admit that. In fact, only at this moment, most of the hatred in my heart truly disappeared. And at this moment, hearing the doctor say that Donald had a very low will to live, I finally let go of it all. Forget it. Let's just let go of myself and him as well. After that day, I never went to the hospital again. Never seeing each other again might be the best ending for me and Donald. As for his illness, there are professional doctors and psychologists to treat it. We are no longer 17 years old, and we are no longer in a foreign country like Los Angeles. He doesn't have to protect me anymore. And I don't have to shed tears for him either. Later, I heard from others. Donald's father didn't make it after all and passed away from illness. And Donald finally became a bit more sober because of his father's death. After returning to Hong Kong City, he sold Donald's company and went to Los Angeles. As for Monica, not only did she not wait for the wedding, but she also had a miscarriage and was left with lifelong illnesses. Only after the Sue family was dragged down did she start to regret it. And all these things have nothing to do with me anymore. In the blink of an eye. It was February, and the Spring Festival was approaching. Jingzhou was filled with the atmosphere of the New Year everywhere. Although I grew up here, when I think about it, I haven't really walked around this city properly for more than 10 years. So, I suggested going for a walk around. However, my parents had been in Jingzhou for a long time. One of them waved their hand and refused, saying, Not interested. The other pushed me and said, Ask Julius to accompany you. I was just thinking that it was better to forget it. If really necessary, I could just go for a walk by myself. But I didn't expect that Julius had already received an order from my mother and was waiting downstairs in Wangjing the next day. During those days, we went to many places. Most of them were all kinds of alleys. Everywhere was filled with the unique relaxation and leisure of Jingzhou. The 100-year-old Chinese ash trees on both sides of the alleys swayed their golden leaves, and all that could be seen were the sahidalers with blue bricks and black tiles. There were grandpas carrying bird cages, humming and singing Beijing operas. Walking through, there was a red persimmon tree planted by an unknown family. The tree was full of heart-shaped persimmons that looked like little lanterns. They were plump, and no one picked them. They were left for the birds flying in the air to peck at. With a splat, they would fall to the ground. In Hong Kong City, every inch of land is precious. Even on the peak of Victoria, there is no trace of leisure. Everyone is rushing forward and has forgotten the path they came from. I was so fascinated by that persimmon tree that I didn't come to my senses until Julius told me to wait and said he would be right back. I gave a hum and told him to do as he pleased. And I walked slowly, waiting for him and continuing to look around. A few minutes later, Julius held a simple bouquet made of persimmons and handed it to me. The fragrant smell of the fruit mixed with the smell of stir-fried peanuts wafted over. On it, there was also a piece of square white paper with the words, "Good things happen." I raised my eyebrows and showed some surprise. "Did you pick them from someone else's house?" He nodded. "I saw you looking at it for a long time. So I went to find that family. When they heard that I wanted to give it to a girl, they were very happy. They used a long pole to cut quite a few down. The peanuts were also freshly stir-fried. They smell really good." I couldn't put it down and looked at it from all angles, saying, "This suits my taste much more than that bunch of Laotian flowers." After I said that, Julius paused. I also realized that I might have offended him and apologized, saying, "Sorry, I didn't mean that." He interrupted me and said, "Gloria, I know what you're worried about. Over the years, I wasn't really waiting for you. It's just that it's too hard to find someone who truly understands me. So I've been single and unmarried all this time." I looked at him and knew that he understood the meaning behind my words. Compared with the faith and waiting symbolized by the Laotian flowers, the ordinary life represented by persimmons and peanuts was what I wanted now. I loved too miserably and painfully and really didn't want to experience that again. I was just about to speak but found that I didn't know how to express myself. Should I say, "I really have no feelings for you, even if you say you haven't been waiting for me all these years. I still feel pressured." Or should I say, "No matter what you do, as long as you have the intention of pursuing me, I will feel a bit uncomfortable." But I had just used him not long ago and said that I wanted to start a new life. How could I explain this? A few seconds later, he seemed to see what I was thinking. Looking at me, he said seriously, "Friends, just friends. Among friends, isn't it only right to help each other?" He was so decisive and knew people's minds so well. He simply and clearly laid out the very thing I was most concerned about. Even though I knew that this might not be his most sincere thought, but he was willing to say directly that we were just friends and firmly promised not to cross the line. He was willing to give me time and space and also protected my sensitive and awkward heart. I was really grateful. After a moment, I smiled and said, "Thank you." He nodded and turned to walk in front of me. It seemed that he was going to take me to walk around Jingzhou City some more, and I followed behind him, feeling relaxed and even a bit expectant, not only for the time ahead but also for the future. Although a whitehead can't be replaced by snow, meeting each other is already a great blessing. But if we really have a future, then some things can also develop naturally and we can get along as we like. Let's talk about it later. Donald's side story. After my father passed away from illness, I brought him back to Hong Kong City and buried him with my mother. My mother passed away in an accident when I was 15 years old. She left suddenly, causing my father to fall into great pain. Whenever he saw me, he would think of my mother. So, he chose to send me abroad. I once thought, if I hadn't met Gloria 2 years later, would I have died in an accident just like my mother? Fortunately, I had Gloria, but then, I lost her. After returning to Hong Kong City, I became much more sober. What pained me the most was that I found that the whole of Hong Kong City was filled with our memories. She was here, facing me day and night, and we lived together for 10 years. I don't know what clouded my mind. That I actually lost her. I only know that I brought all this upon myself. How much she loved me, enduring 10 years of gossip for me. But I was actually greedy. When I had her, I still wanted a child of my own. I couldn't stay in Hong Kong City any longer. So, I sold Donald's company. I also couldn't set foot in Jingzhou anymore. She said that she didn't want to see me again and that she was going to start a new life. After thinking it over and over again, I crossed the ocean and returned to Los Angeles. It seemed that only here was there something that could support me for the rest of my life. One day, I returned to the UCLA campus and sat under the big tree that we often went to for a long time. When I stood up, my feet were a bit numb. I hunched over to massage my calves. Suddenly, I saw a line of Chinese characters. It had been many years, but I could still vaguely make out what was written. At that moment, I was in so much pain that I could hardly straighten up. I coughed for a long time until I coughed up a dark black blood clot before I could catch my breath. I knew that I didn't have much time left. I looked at that line of words seriously. My reason collapsed into pieces with a bang again. I hid behind the tree and wept uncontrollably. What on earth had I done? Until the sun set, I took out that Mont Blanc pen without ink from my pocket and wrote stroke by stroke. Gloria, I'm sorry. The end.